actually, for me, any woman will know that the enforcers of patriarchy are rarely men, right? That your first enforcer of patriarchy is usually your mom and your sisters. And that's because when you inhabit a more precarious space, right, you understand the danger better, okay? So as somebody in teaching, right, in K-12 education, that's a very pink-collar profession. I think, honestly, the honest truth is, after I have been through this whole graph of process, and many times, after I've been through the whole model and much time has passed, I honestly try to hold the mobber in my heart and think about the precarity of their position and what are the reasons for why they must do that within the framework that they exist and they live. And how can so my karmic job is not to liberate my mobber, my theoretical mobber or whatever, but it is to free myself of the resentment I have or the injury that I carry by trying to understand them more and trying to think deeply about how we can all be liberated and how we can empower each other to create solidarity together.
Do you want me to ask some online questions? Okay. So we have one from Dr. Janine Wallace. I think it's for you, Anne-Marie. I work in biopharmaceutical research as a clinical quality manager, and I did my PhD on mobbing. Oh. Yeah. I also recently had a moment of truth experience. My question is, in the new normal, does that idea assume aware, new normal on a new team, new job, etc.?
Does new normal count if you change jobs and you get away from the mobbing? I think the clock resets. It's a whole new place. And maybe you'll get mobbed again, but it's for different reasons. It was like the hawk, right? My husband couldn't be mobbed by somebody not including him in a meeting. He'd be happy. So he was hard to get to, so you have a different group of people there. One thing I wanted to add, the before and after the mobbing, can you imagine if you stopped and you left right before the moment of truth, compared to if you went through the moment of truth and you left at any point after? One is very savable. One, is. Yeah. So what do? Do we go around table? You know what? It looks like you're being mobbed. You gotta resign. Yeah. You gotta walk out. Anyway. Yeah. But can you imagine how easy it would be?
Yeah. Okay. So another question, I think this one's for Catherine, from Janet Glover Kerkvliet. What would you say are inappropriate models for individual and group psychotherapy?
It depends on, or is this on?
Yeah.
It's on.
It is.
Oh, it is on? Yeah. I think it really depends on the specific thing, like the specific set of symptoms or the impact that either mobbing or moral injury has had. An example of if a person's mobbing has resulted in moral injury, then something such as exposure therapy or EMDR or CBT, a very manualized, cognitively oriented treatment, when you're dealing with something that's really at a profound existential level, trying to convince somebody cognitively that everything is okay and to think about it differently, when it's actually their moral compass that has been violated, will be counterproductive. And that really comes out of the whole concept of moral injury arose from the fact that the traditional PTSD, often trauma-informed treatments for PTSD were not working.
Yeah.
And people were plunging into deeper despair. So that,
Okay.
but it really, it gets into pretty clinical kinds of domains. So that's from my lay perspective, but if somebody's a clinician, I'd be happy to have an offline conversation and probe into that more deeply.
Great.
I think we have to go because the next group
Oh,
is coming.
do we take a break now, or we keep, no, we go right through? So we
No
still have a
break.
few minutes. Yeah, then okay, so there's one for Lindsay from Ileana Ramirez. Hi, Ileana, nice to wish you were here, but glad you're online. Thank you for the hope and trauma-informed approach to that outstanding presentation, Lindsay Brown. Your students and school are so lucky to have you. Okay, so it's a comment. There's another one for Catherine. Are people who hold religious beliefs more susceptible to moral injury based on beliefs of right versus wrong and evil versus good? That's quite an interesting question.
I don't think.
That's Maritza Reyes, by the way.
Yeah, I don't think that they are, although that would be I can see how one could come to that particular conclusion because, no, I personally don't think they are. I think we all have values. For some people, their values may be cloaked or held. Their paradigm may be more religious or faith-oriented. But essentially, people have values,
Yeah.
whether or not they're faith-based or not. So I think we're all as vulnerable.
Lindsay and Catherine both spoke about institutional betrayal. And in some of my work and research, what I've come across is that many mobs are instigated because the mobbers, the instigators, feel like they've been betrayed by their institutions and that the mob is justified because it's rectifying a wrong. But then on the other hand, the victim, the target of the mob, also feels that their institution betrayed them by selling them out, by not giving them their union protections, their tenure protections, whatever the case may be. So how would you parse apart the duties of care that both parties to an institutional mob subjectively believe belong to them, and at least from a perspective of mediating these conflicts, let alone scratching down to the surface of who's in the right and who is entitled to whatever level of protection.
So I'm going to jump in real quick first. I think that's exactly how it works, which is one of the reasons that I think that institutions that are on the front lines of interrupting trauma in society, right, or who are at the bottom of a lot of social violence, right, are at grave risk. And then that dynamic occurs within the institution, right, of the survival dynamic. It is a little bit like the cycle of trauma, right? The traumatized becomes a traumatizer, right? You're wrapped up like this, right? So to simply say, oh, the institute, and a lot of times the institutions where this is ripe are also institutions that are scapegoated by society. I work in urban education. My institution is scapegoated by my entire community, right, who has betrayed the children that are served by my institution by divesting systematically from them, right? That is the root cause. That's what's uphill from what's happening here, right? So, it's like, it's terrible, you know what I mean? It's terrible to say that. I don't know how to, that's what I am searching for, I think, as a leader, how to create a shield around an institution that is doing a noble service, right? And interrupting a social ill, but ends up perpetuating that violence internally. I don't know what the answer to that question is, but I do think that, again, this model by Jennifer Freed around institutional courage really does break down and provide a lot of, like, what does that look like? What are the pieces of that? How can I empower my team to put that into practice? Because the other thing is that if you have a team that functions like that within an institution that does not function like that, your team becomes a target.
Yep.
So, again, it's so structural that it's very difficult to subscribe an easy answer.
Yeah, I don't think there are any easy answers, and to bring the psychologist lens to this particular thing, I increasingly think that many, if not most, institutions are really psychopathic in nature. I mean, you just kind of look at the decision making, and Ching-Li's presentation about the sort of intergenerational transmission of a culture that pathologizes. And, you know, within higher education and the sector that I've been in, you know, for 37 years once I graduated with my PhD, so I have been in it for a long time. It doesn't matter what institution I was at. I've been in small, private, big, you know, public, research, domestic, international, faith-based, secular. I've not ever met, you know, an individual that in higher ed that I think is evil or set out to do something bad, but they have behaved badly. You know, there's really bad behaviors, and I think that traumatizes people. And I don't know your name, the person who asked the question, but and I think it was Steve who's like talked about, you know, being mobbed and mobbing. It's like our own complicity in our silence when we see things. Like, you can't fix everything. And when you work in a system, whether it's education or healthcare or government or corporate or law, the systems are so fundamentally broken that the way that I personally make peace with it, because I think we should work towards changing systems, but I do. But the little piece that I've decided to commit to is whoever's in front of me, that I will extend my whatever capacity I have to alleviate their suffering in this moment. And I do think that if all of us can embrace compassion and empathy and choosing to do right and respecting dignity, that there will be change. And it's perhaps not terribly satisfying, and perhaps it won't really, but that's kind of where I've come to as I have my whole life searched for the right institution.